Hello, ladies and gentlemen, board game enthusiasts of all ages. Welcome to another episode of the Escape the Board podcast, where we're all about tabletop gaming and escaping boredom. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Connor Sligowski, and my co-host,
Charles Holm. Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more about some game mechanics that you'll find inside of board games. I think last time we did this, we had a lot of fun talking about some of the different types of games that we enjoy playing and how we kind of categorize them. And we've got some more selections here for you today. So if you hear any games that you really enjoy playing, maybe you'll find some more games along kind of those same lines that you might want to try out.
Yeah, so today we're going to be going over three more mechanics. We're going to be going over the dice rolling mechanic, card drafting, as well as set collection. And I think there's some really fun games that fall into each of these categories. And like Charles said, if you enjoy any of the games that we mention, maybe you'll learn a new game that falls into that same sort of category so that you can try something new and hopefully enjoy it.
So, dice rolling, I think, is where we want to start off.
Absolutely.
Dice rolling game is any game where there is a dice, right? So Monopoly.
No.
No?
No. So dice rolling is anything where there is a decent amount of dice. Mostly the dice are used for major amounts of... What's the word I'm looking for?
The dice is like the major feature of the game. So
yes.
Like I said, Monopoly, right? The point of Monopoly is to collect properties and to build a fortune. The dice just let you know, it just adds a sense of randomness, right? You could do the same thing.
Probability.
Well, sure.
That's the word I was looking for. It increases the mass amount of the board game comes down to probability.
Sure.
In the bigger amounts of dice.
Sure, and that's certainly true. I think that you can have dice games with relatively few amounts of dice involved. In fact, actually, I own a game we haven't played very often. It's been years and years since we played it. But I have a Marvel dice rolling game where you kind of collect heroes, and each hero is associated with some dice. And you actually start off with relatively few dice, and then as the game progresses, you kind of advance your collection.
Right.
So I think the number of dice isn't necessarily a big deal so much as the function of the dice.
That's probably fair.
Let's say like the game of life, you move around the board by rolling a spinner, right? Well, you could do the same thing with Monopoly. The dice isn't a critical element of the game. It isn't.
Yeah.
It adds a little bit of chance and randomness into the game. But you could do that with something completely different.
Absolutely.
In a dice rolling game, the dice are key. They do something very special and very unique.
Very specific to the game.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like dice rolling games, there is one game in particular in my collection.
Yeah, we do not stop playing it.
It is almost every game night we are pulling it out, and that is the game of Dice Throne.
Dice Throne is a great game. Highly recommend for anyone that just likes hearing the click-clack of dice falling around.
Math rocks make click-clack.
They do that. But yeah, Dice Throne is kind of like... it's like Yahtzee meets...
Magic the Gathering, if you're familiar with it.
Kind of, yeah.
That's the best description I've ever seen online. So with Dice Throne, you do have a set of 6 dice, just like Yahtzee. Yahtzee is another dice rolling game, if you hadn't caught on to that at this point.
Can't really replace the dice in Yahtzee with, drawing sticks or something.
Yeah.
Right?
But Dice Throne, you play as a character. Each character has their own unique set of dice, their own unique deck. And then it's generally a PvP battle. There is a lot of chance with the dice. You're rolling to see if you can activate any of your character's abilities on your character board. It is a blast to play. I currently have 8 characters. 10 characters.
Yeah, you got 8 Marvel characters.
Yeah, 8 Marvel characters. That means I've got 12. Because I have 2 boxes from the actual game. So 12 characters in total, and you can guarantee I will have more someday. This game, and because of how many characters there are and how unique every character is, this game plays differently every time you play it. It is incredible as a game. One of our personal favorites.
Absolutely. Can you think of any other dice rolling games that we have or played?
Well, so we mentioned Yahtzee.
The Marvel dice game that I have.
Right. And honestly, I can't think of any others in our personal collections off the top of my head. Betrayal has a dice rolling mechanic to it, but again, like you said,
Monopoly,
it doesn't.
You could
it's not a core. It's not.
You could replace the dice with something else. All it is just throwing something random into
That's
the game.
true.
You could replace the dice in Betrayal with drawing sticks.
That's fair. that's probably fair. I do have a game behind me, actually. Kingdom Hearts Perilous Pursuit.
We have not gotten around to playing that yet.
We have not played it yet, but it does have a large set of dice right in the front of the box. So I'm assuming that's a dice roller when we do get around to covering that game, which I think we're planning on doing in the next few episodes.
You know what really stands out to me about your Kingdom Hearts game, and those dice specifically? So when you think of a dice, normally you think it's got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right?
Right.
And every now and then you'll see dice that don't do that. If you've got dice with really weird symbols on it, chances are you're looking at a dice rolling game.
Right. And Kingdom Hearts does have unique symbols on every die.
Well, you know what else is a dice rolling game? And this one comes up all the time, obviously. Most tabletop RPGs like D&D or Pathfinder, they are role-playing games in the sense that you're trying to get into character with someone else, but replacing those dice isn't really an option. They do add an interesting.
You could add different dice, but you need that sense of randomness.
There's a way that you can change the randomness up a little bit, but because they use such varied dice, and I think that's really the thing. Is like if you want a random thing, like in Monopoly or in Betrayal, you can roll a dice and it gives you a random number, or you can do something else that gives you a random thing.
Right.
But when you start replacing those basic 6-sided dice with something unique, like in Dice Throne, they replace they don't replace the numbers, but they add special symbols onto the dice.
Right.
Or like in D&D, where you have to have a very specific size dice.
Yes. So D&D, yes, you do have to have the D20, but there are tabletops that roll just D6s.
There are. And some of those I think we could still classify as dice rolling games. And some of them I think get far enough away from the dice mechanic that you could separate them from that.
That's probably fair.
But definitely a lot of tabletop role-playing games I think could fall into the dice rolling category. I mean, even at our own sessions, we always make the joke, okay, is this a role-playing game or a role-playing game?
Yes.
Right, because are we playing roles or are we rolling dice?
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's a pretty common joke around the tabletop role-playing game community. Like, it is a role-playing game, but it is also a role-play game. And yeah, dice games vary, obviously, in their complexity, in their dice type, in their dice use. I don't know if I would count it as a dice rolling game. I'm kind of curious about your opinion on this one.
Okay.
It's by Magical Unicorns. I think that's not the company. Unstable Unicorns. It's by the company that makes Unstable Unicorns.
Okay.
It's in my collection. Most of my collection is upstairs, so we don't have the option of actually looking.
Well, yeah. The only thing I'm thinking in that category is Exploding Kittens. That's not a dice rolling game.
No, it's the game where you play as an animal and you're trying to collect all of the classes.
That's definitely on the fence for me. I get what you're saying.
There is
Here
only
to Slay.
Yes, Here to Slay. Thank you. There are only 2 dice, but it is a mechanic of the game, like a fairly crucial mechanic to the game.
But I was actually about to bring up Risk as well, because in Risk, one of the major elements is rolling dice to see who's winning the battle.
Right.
And I feel like those games kind of fall in line with like the Monopoly issue,
right?
Where you could replace that with a spinner.
Yeah.
You could replace it with something else that gives you a random number.
That's fair. Is there anything else you'd like to say about dice rolling before we move on?
I do like the click-clack.
Yeah, Math Rocks make click-clack. Speaking of Math Rocks make click-clack, we've started recording our D&D sessions.
That's true. Yeah,
I want to plug that real quick.
Yeah, we're going to be posting those up soon. So
we're going to have those up on YouTube, hopefully, probably on TikTok.
Yeah.
Not family friendly.
Well, probably not. We're looking into some options for editing where we might be able to get some episodes up that are family friendly.
Maybe.
But definitely we would like to release full unedited videos as well for anyone with a little bit more of a sadistic sense of humor.
That's fair. We do have a couple of other games I found in the dice rolling game category real quick before we move on.
Sure.
The games of Raw, which I know neither of us have either played.
I've looked at it. Yeah.
Definitely interested in picking it up, as well as Roll Through the Ages.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
It's one, just, in researching for the video, it's one that came up in my searching, and it actually looks really fun. It's definitely another game that I'd love to pick up.
Right.
Obviously, like I've mentioned in previous episodes, I think my next game that I want to pick up is Mansions of Madness.
Sure, Mansions would be good.
But Roll Through the Ages is definitely something I'm interested in looking at in the future.
Speaking of, here's one more in our collection that we do have that's a role-playing game.
Kind of overviewed?
Yeah, kind of. Back on the lines of tabletop RPGs and D&D and stuff, the Pathfinder card game is a dice
I just kind of
as well. Well, sure, yeah.
Lumped that in with
good reasons to lump it together, but it is a unique take on.
Yeah, it is its own board game. We have
thematically the same
boxes,
but it's a very different mechanically.
Right, that's fair. And I think that about does it for dice rolling.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on to card drafting.
Oh boy, I'm going to be honest. Not one of my personal favorite mechanics.
No, it's not necessarily a personal favorite mechanic, but there are a couple of games that use it that I'm very fond of.
Sure.
So Blood Rage being my top pick.
Blood Rage was pretty good. I like Blood Rage. Isle of Cats, I think, was a very interesting game. Let's explain real fast for everyone out there watching
what a card drafting game is.
Yeah, so
what a drafting game is, I guess, because Isle of Cats doesn't necessarily use cards.
Well, they do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They draft cards and then.
Yeah. I'd forgotten about that for a second.
Isle of Cats actually does a double draft.
Yeah.
They do an open and a closed draft.
Right. So yeah.
What is a draft?
So a drafting game, specifically card drafting, is where you are given a certain number of cards at the beginning of a round, and you take those cards, you look at all of them, you pick one or two depending on the game, keep those, and pass everything else on.
Yes and no. So that's an open draft. Open drafting is when everyone kind of gets to look at the options and you pick all up. But when I say the Isle of Cats is also a closed drafting, sometimes drafting games let you pick from a personal selection and you just kind of toss away the rest. So drafting is when you have.
I'm afraid I'm not remembering the part of Isle of Cats where you look.
Sure. Yeah. I'll just run you through the mechanics real fast. So at the beginning of every round of Isle of Cats, everyone starts with 7 cards, and you take 2, and you pass the rest to the left or to the right, depending on what round it is.
Right.
And then after everyone's selected cards, and you've got 7 new cards from the open draft, you then decide which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to toss, and you have to pay fish for the ones that you want to keep.
Okay. So that second half of that would be considered the closed draft.
Right. So
that makes sense.
In essence, a drafting game is any game where you have a collection of things and you get to decide which ones you want to keep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sushi Go is another really good example.
Oh yeah, I love Sushi Go. That is very childish, very fun, very fast paced.
It's very family friendly.
It is.
And when I think card drafting, when I think of a drafting game, and if I'm going to sit down, we both have kids.
Yeah.
I mean, here in a few years when they're all old enough, that's probably going to be their first introduction to drafting games.
Yeah,
because it's super easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
It is fast paced, but it's I mean, there are these fun little food characters on the cards. Like, the artwork is adorable. And yeah, I think that's going to be probably the first card draft example that our kids are introduced to.
Sure.
I think that's a really good entry level as far as card drafting goes for people to try. It's such a fun game.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
And it is quick pace. Like, if you like fast games, a game of Sushi Go can be played in like 20 minutes.
Now, when I say fast paced, it's not that you have to think on your feet, right? You don't have to be like, oh, I got to play so fast. It's just the rounds are over so quickly.
Yeah, it's a fast game.
There are not a lot of decisions to make, and then the round is over, and then you start a new round.
Yeah. It's one of those games where if you want to play a game with your friends or your family and you don't have a lot of time to do so, it's a quick game. It's in this little tiny tin. Mm-hmm. You pull it out, deal out cards, do the first round. It really is. The game is started and over within probably a half hour at max, unless you're like super slow and teaching.
I don't think I have ever had a round last half an hour.
Yeah,
it's like a
super fast game.
Yeah. And then every game should last you about 3 rounds. The rules specifically say it should be 3 rounds. So, I mean, with rounds lasting usually about 5 minutes, the whole game is over in 15.
Yeah, 15, 20 minutes. Earlier, we did mention Blood Rage.
Yes, we can definitely go back to that.
I would love to go back to Blood Rage, because that is my personal favorite in this category.
Now, you say in this category, but Blood Rage isn't really a drafting game.
It is and it isn't.
It's an area management game with some drafting elements.
I would put it in both.
Honestly, you don't make the same argument about Isle of Cats, because Isle of Cats is really more of a tile placement with drafting, with strong draft. It's a major mechanic in the game,
right?
But I wouldn't say
Isle of Cats is one of those games that I would argue fits into several categories as a board game, as far as mechanically.
Sure.
It's a draft, it's a tile placement, it could even fit into set collection.
Turn-based strategy.
Isle of Cats, and I think that's what makes Isle of Cats a fun game. Like, and I think we've mentioned this before on the channel, every game that seems to have the worst theming tends to have the best mechanics.
Hold up now. You are being unnecessarily spiteful.
I'm not being spiteful.
What is wrong with Isle of Cats theme?
So, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the game of Isle of Cats, I picked this game up on a whim on Facebook.
On a good whim.
On a good whim. This game is fantastic to play, but it is a game about a sinking island and you are saving cats on your sailboats.
Well, that's not quite honest. The island isn't sinking. There's a band of pirates that's going to come and murder all the cats on the island.
That's even worse. It's so ridiculous.
You gotta save the cats before the pirates show up.
It's a ridiculous premise.
You have 5 days before they get there to collect as many cats as you can and get them back to safety.
Absolutely ridiculous premise. The theming is redonkulous. I would argue, honestly, this is not a game that I would pick up had it not been super cheap on Facebook.
Sure.
If I was just in a game store, I would pick up something like Ark Nova or I don't know, any of the meaty games other than Isle of Cats. Like, you think a game based on cats, that's not a game that I would initially be drawn to in a game store. It's
like the second game I looked at in game store.
And it is a fantastic game, but it is one of those games that fits into so many different categories, and I think that's what makes it so fun to play.
Sure.
Back to Blood Rage.
I'm sorry, just before we go back to Blood Rage, one little caveat. It's fun for people that really like complex games, but the honesty is it is very difficult to learn games like that.
It can be. Your mom picked it up fairly well.
She picked it up because she had people showing her step-by-step what to do.
That's true.
And reminding her every round what it's time to do.
That's fair.
The thing is, there's like 6 or 7 different phases in every round. And it's complicated.
It is a big box game.
It's a complex game.
It is.
Even as far as big box games go, it's fairly complicated. They're complex. There are a lot of very unique because of the mechanics, there's a lot of very unique rules that don't intuitively mesh together. Thematically, they mesh just fine. The game works.
Yeah,
it does. But it's like looking at like a watch, the gears of a watch, right? There's so many small pieces turning, and if you take one thing out, the whole game just kind of falls apart.
Right. I get where you're coming from. If you're a board game enthusiast, and this is not a game you've heard of, I would recommend looking into it.
If you're not a board game enthusiast and you love cats and you're willing to spend 2 hours reading the book over and over again, you might want to get into this.
That's probably a bit much. I don't think it would take 2 hours to learn this game.
It depends.
It's a fun game. And if you have somebody who enjoys learning rules for a game, definitely have them do it and explain it to you. Very fun to play. Speaking of which, I saw a shirt online the other day that said, "I read the rules so you don't have to."
It's a good shirt.
Yeah.
It's a good motto.
I think I'm going to adapt that and turn it into one of our shirts. Speaking of which, shirts coming soon. Another little plug.
Yeah, check out our web store. It is webstore.us.webstore.com.
No,
not that.
No, we'll make sure that once the link to that is live, we'll put it in the description.
There should be a link down below. Yeah. Blood Rage.
Yeah. Did we cover Isle of Cats all the way? We'll probably bring it up again in Underset Collection.
Well, I mean, here's the thing about the Isle of Cats. I'm joking. Blood Rage.
Blood Rage. I love Blood Rage.
Is it because it's very role-playing-esque? It is because it's medieval fantasy type crap?
No, it's really not. I mean, it is, but it's not. It's not medieval. It's not Vikings.
It's not British medieval. It's Norse medieval.
There you go.
It's very thematic with Thor and Ragnarok. And,
yeah. So Blood Rage plays. You are separate clans of Vikings trying to take control of different
regions,
realms.
Yeah, realms.
Part of the 9 realms. You've got Asgard and Jotunheim and all that fun stuff that Thor talks about in the first Thor movie of the Marvel series.
Or for anyone that actually reads Norse mythology, is literally the 9 realms.
It is the 9 realms.
Yggdrasil. Which Yggdrasil, for some reason, is its own realm in this game.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
No, it's not too weird.
Anyhow, so you're fighting for control of the 9 realms and Yggdrasil itself. It is a heavy area control type game where you place your workers
unit. They're not
units.
They're not worker. It's not.
Right. It's not a worker placement.
It's combat.
You place your units.
It's more like Risk.
And yeah, it is very Risk-esque in its base mechanics. But there is, at the beginning of every round, a draft to it.
There is.
And you're drafting cards, kind of like the cards that you draw in Risk, where they can either help your units or deter your opponents. Mm-hmm. Those are in there, but you're also drafting additional units in the forms of like elves and
specialty unit upgrades.
Yeah, you can upgrade your units. You can get brand new units. There's a troll. There's a glacier.
There's a fire giant, a frost giant.
There's all sorts of fun, unique little.
There's a sea monster.
Yeah,
dwarves.
It's fun because again, in a game like this, every playthrough is going to be different. We've only ever played the 2 of us. This is a game I would love to pull out a game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It plays up to 4 people.
I think 2 to 4 people. It is heavy. It is very much a Risk-esque type game. It is area control. It is combat. It is cards. You're upgrading your characters, your armies as you move along. You get different bonuses based on where you take control of. Very much Risk-esque, but it does have that draft component. It is a sub-component, like you mentioned before, but as far as card drafting games, I think Blood Rage fits towards the top of my list.
Well, when I say it's like a sub-element, think back to like Sushi Go. Like that's
all it is.
You can't play the game without drafting.
Right.
Blood Rage, you could just as easily draw and just be stuck with whatever you draw. Actually, isn't that an optional rule for new players? Is just keep your hand?
No. So maybe.
Yeah, I think that's an optional rule. I think it called that out as like, hey, look, if
for the first round.
Yeah,
I think
if you're not familiar with this game, for the first round, try it without the draft.
Right. And then after that, you start drafting. I love the drafting component to it.
Oh, yeah.
It makes it, there's so much more strategy.
Like I suddenly love drafting. Now, my big problem with drafting, I'll just throw this out here.
Go for it.
There is so much, I guess, anxiety that builds up, some uncertainty. When I'm looking at my hand, I'm like, okay, well,
I see. I already know where you're going with this.
So one of two things will happen. I guess one of three things, or the third thing never happens. Either there's nothing good in my hand. I'm like, okay, well, my hand sucks, and I have to pick something. And that guy over there is getting all the good stuff, and he gets first picks. Or flip it, and I'm the other guy. I've got a good hand. I'm like, okay, well, I need this and this, and I can't let him have this, and I know he's going to hand me trash.
And what's the third option?
The third option is that you start your hand with two good options. And you take both of those and hand all the trash to the other guy.
Yeah. Like I said, I knew where you were going with that. Yeah, there's always that chance that you're going to get either a crap hand or you're going to get a really good hand, and you want everything in your hand, and you can't take everything in your hand.
Right.
But honestly, I think that adds more intrigue to the game, in my opinion.
It does, just not my favorite way to add it.
Not everybody's cup of tea. I get it.
Yep.
I like I said, I personally love Blood Rage, and I love that it is a drafting game. I don't know of another drafting game that I really enjoy other than maybe Sushi Go.
I mean, Magic the Gathering has a draft version we played a couple of times.
But it's not my favorite way to play Magic.
No, it's not.
I prefer straight up Commander. Build your deck. I mean, drafting is okay, especially, especially if you're playing in a new set and you get to explore and discover the cards in the new set as you're playing.
Speaking of, actually, so you might not enjoy open drafting in Magic, but Magic itself is generally a closed drafting game. If you buy yourself a bunch of packs and you open them up and you decide which ones to put into your deck, that is literally closed drafting.
That's a bit of a stretch, but I guess I'll give that to you.
I have a collection of things and I decide which ones to keep.
Oh, man.
That's a draft.
That's a stretch.
It's a draft.
That's a stretch, is what that is.
Okay, all right, but it's still a draft.
Can you think of any other games in our collections?
Oh boy, no, I cannot.
This is not a game.
It's not a super common mechanic.
It's not a card mechanic we have a lot of experience in. I know the game Seven Wonders.
Sure.
I think is a card drafting game, and then in my research, I came across a game called Bunny Kingdom.
That sounds terrible. Sign me up.
Right. So it's kind of like the theming.
Cats,
yeah. I saw really positive reviews about it.
Okay.
So I think that's something we should probably look into at some point in the future. But I don't know of a lot of other card drafting games. There's not a lot.
Poker. Poker is a closed draft.
Specifically Texas Hold'em.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I could, yeah. Okay. I could get behind that.
Okay. Well, there we go. We got one more game to the list.
Yeah. And if that pretty much sums up card drafting, we can move on to our final mechanic for the day, and that would be set collection.
Yes, set collection.
This is a game type that I think is more prevalent than even I would have originally thought.
Oh, so it's super common.
It is super common. I didn't realize how common until I started looking into it.
It's almost too easy to add set collection as a sub-element to any game.
Right.
Isle of Cats is a set collection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And like I told you, we'd come back to Isle of Cats and set collection. I called it.
Go Fish is set collection.
Right. And
Old Maid is set collection. Phase 10 is set collection.
Super 8s.
Yeah. I mean,
when you think of almost any old school card game,
yeah, most of those are set.
It's going to be set collection.
Mm-hmm. Poker is set collection.
Again, that's a stretch.
That one was a stretch.
Yeah, that was a stretch.
I was a little jokingly, but still.
But yeah, any rummy based game.
Oh yeah, sure.
Rummy Cube, Rummy Gin, just straight up Rummy.
Yeah, those are all set collection.
All going to be set collection.
Along the same. No, completely ignore that.
We've gone over several games. Let's explain what set collection is.
Yeah, so that's when you're collecting a set of things. And that's about it.
It's a fairly layman's way of explaining it. Set collection is a mechanic where you are, collecting
a
sets of certain numbers or colors or just different
units,
different sets. Mm-hmm. You could think of, let's go back to the Go Fish.
Sure.
As a really good example of what a set collection is.
Pretty straightforward, pretty obvious what a set collection. I
have 4 of this number in my hand. It goes down in front of me. Those are my points.
Yep.
And you do not get to play them until you have the full set.
Yes and no. Like you can have set collections where you can kind of mess with them a little bit beforehand.
Yes, so you always have to have a base set.
Right.
So like
Monopoly is a set collection. So because
I normally argue with you on your Monopoly can be this. I'm like
it's Monopoly,
but no, Monopoly is set collection.
Yes.
You collect certain sets of properties,
and once you have the set, you get a special bonus,
right.
And then you can start adding onto it.
Yeah. I will not argue with you on that one.
Monopoly is set collection.
That is Yeah.
And Ticket to Ride is set collection.
Ticket to Ride, I think, is a more current big box version of the set collection, but absolutely.
Pandemic is set collection.
Pandemic is the one that I was about to bring up. Mm-hmm. Probably my favorite set collection game that is in our collective board game library.
Fair enough.
I love
definitely top
Pandemic.
5 for me.
It is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's the only cooperative set collection game we own.
Well, that can't be right. We don't own a lot of cooperative games, do we?
No. It's kind of why I was even somewhat willing to say it. There's not a lot of co-op games in our library between the two of us. But it is... I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is...
Right.
If not the only, pretty close to the only cooperative set collection.
In our collection.
In our collection.
Yeah, it could be. Regardless.
Pandemic, if you're unfamiliar with it, is a super fun co-op game. You're trying to cure diseases that are spreading across the world. And
you do it by collecting
sets of countries.
Other cities.
Right.
Is what they are.
You're right.
But there's a red disease, and in order to cure it, I need 4 red cards. And there's a blue disease, and in order to cure it, I need 4 blue cards.
And what makes it cooperative is if you're in the same city or if you have certain roles in the game, you can trade your cards back and forth to make sure that certain characters are getting the right sets so that they can go to the research station and cure the disease. I could not recommend Pandemic enough. I say that about a lot of games.
To be fair, there's a lot of good games.
There's a lot of really good games. And there's a lot of really good games in our collections. There's games that we on my game shelf right now that will probably never get covered on this channel. Well, and then I could very easily just send it to the DI or something. Movies and entertainment trivia. Not something I'd probably ever cover on a channel like this or on a podcast like this. Definitely something, like I said, I could just take it to Goodwill or DI and I would never miss it. But you give me something like, another Voices in My Head game right there next to the one I said I could live without. Games that are amazing to play. Games that we pull out regularly. Not that Voices in My Head has been pulled out regularly, but games that are fantastic to play, that are they scratch that board game itch. Let's put it that way.
Strange way to put it, but sure.
I got an itch, and this board game scratches it. It stays in the collection.
Yep. It stays in the collection. I've got a different policy on that. If it's in the collection, it stays in the collection. That's all it is to me.
I mean, yeah, maybe.
I got it, I keep it. Them's the rules.
But not every game I own, I got. I mean, I got it, but I didn't buy it.
I didn't say buy.
That's fair.
If it's in my collection, it's staying in my collection unless it is damaged beyond playability.
Okay, fair enough. I'm not saying I'm going to get rid of those games. I'm just saying I could live without them.
Case in point, I have a game called Stratego where I'm actually missing a piece. And theoretically, so Stratego is kind of like a weird checkers kind of war game. And in theory, you should have all the pieces for a game like that, right?
Yep.
Well, the thing is, I don't have all the pieces, but it's still in my collection.
It's fair.
It's not leaving.
Yep.
Okay.
But we've already talked about that. I eventually will be printing brand new pieces for that game, and you will have a full working set.
That would be nice. The problem I'm worried about is colors.
That's why I'm printing
the whole set. Well,
that's exactly.
Not necessarily the whole set. It just has to be one side, just the side that's missing a piece.
It's true.
Yeah, we don't have to get the whole set.
I would probably print both sides, because if you only print one, you're going to have one side with stickers and one side without.
Yeah, it is what it is. It's playable.
It's true.
If it's playable, it stays.
I think another game in set collection that neither of us own, but have, I think we've probably both looked into it, is Ark Nova.
I have not looked into it personally. I've looked at it.
That's fair. Definitely seen it in game stores. Looks like a fun game. Seems to have good reviews online.
Sure.
And that's something that I think somewhere down the line, I keep saying somewhere down the line, I'm going to buy. You got to have money to buy.
So it sounds like you've looked into Ark Nova. What makes it a set collection game?
When I say look into, I mean I've looked at reviews.
How do we know it's a set collection game?
That's another one of those games that in my research, it came up as a set collection.
It is because someone said it is.
It is no different than Raw, Roll Through the Ages, or Bunny Kingdom. Those are all the same sort of thing in my research.
Okay, well, those are probably set collection games then.
No, probably not. We don't know, so we don't know.
We don't know.
I think that pretty much covers us for today.
Sure, yeah.
Unless you got anything else to add.
No, just thanks everyone for joining in and watching today's episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out some of our other media out there.
Yeah, I mean, this was a shorter episode than we've recorded in the past. Which
not too short.
I mean, we've ran a decent length of time. Shorter than we've recorded previous.
Anyway, until next time.
Make sure to escape all the boredom. We'll see you soon.